I'm planning to start with a bit of background. I mean, because of the need to reschedule and reorganize the session, I'd originally sort of set out objectives and outcomes for a much longer workshop. And I'd intended to spend quite a bit of time looking at the idea of unified active learning as an important context for understanding media-enhanced teaching and learning. So if I start saying METaL, you will know that I'm talking about media-enhanced teaching and learning. So let me make a start, and other people will hopefully have read enough of the abstract to catch up. But I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So hello, everyone. I am Andrew Middleton. I've been at Anglia Ruskin University for just over 2 years now. I've had a keen interest in media-enhanced learning or media-enhanced teaching and learning for a long time. And I've met some of you, I'm sure, through initiatives relating to that work over the years. At Anglia Ruskin, I am leading the Media-Enhanced Teaching and Learning project, exploring ideas around the use of media, especially in the context of an active learning environment. And sorry, I'm just reorganizing my screen a little. Yeah, so in this session, in this workshop, I'm going to be reflecting on experiences of trying to engage with METaL and the procurement of a suitable media enterprise system that of course has coincided with the pandemic, which has both been the problem, of course, but also an opportunity to actually reflect on what we need of a learning environment in this day and age. So just bear with me for a short while. I hope to get to the point in the workshop where we actually have quite a lot of time to talk about different pedagogies and requirements from a media system. So the focus really for the session will be to look at the unified active learning framework that I've developed really in response to COVID. But it's almost a distillation of Anglia Ruskin's active curriculum framework. So the short story there is at Anglia Ruskin, we have an absolute commitment to active learning. And that becomes really interesting in terms of thinking about the use of digital media. And by that, I mean video, audio in particular for me, but images and probably anything that you want it to refer to, because some of this isn't as simple as being a technical media. In fact, we can bring elements of social media into this, and that would be quite important in understanding the way we think about such an enhanced learning environment. So, one of the questions really is, how does media fit into a networked learning context? So, yeah, we'll look at unified active learning and the richness that we're after if we think about video, audio, images, and such media. And undoubtedly, by the time we get talking to each other, hopefully we'll be sharing some ideas around media-enhanced pedagogies. And then asking ourselves the question that I've been asking with colleagues over the last couple of years: what sort of infrastructure do we need to make any of this work? So, yeah, as I said, Anglia Ruskin attracted me because of its commitment to active curriculum and the rollout of our active curriculum framework. And with the pandemic, of course, we have had to reconsider our commitment to active learning. I'll tell you, we didn't spend too long reconsidering. When we realized we had to move online, it wasn't a question when the pandemic hit of panicking. It wasn't a question of saying, well, we've just spent a whole year working with every undergraduate course to develop and revalidate the curriculum to align it to the principles of and ideas and opportunities of active learning. We didn't panic. We actually said, we've just done the work we we needed to have done. We've put ourselves in a really good position to respond to the pandemic. And as I say, the implication of that is we looked at unified active learning. And I'll explain now what that actually means, because it's a term that, you know, we conjured up, but it was to encapsulate some key ideas. The very same ideas will hold us in good stead as we think about media. So these were the guiding principles that a working group, which I led, sort of put together. Nothing here that's rocket science. These are the things that we wanted to focus people's minds on. So curriculum, engagement, delivery, it's active and collaborative. And it's all about engagement around stimulating content. Importantly, when we talk about active learning at Anglia Ruskin, we talk about active, inclusive, and collaborative learning. So the second point is it's a unified experience that involves all students learning together. That together word means, yes, together at the same time in the same place, even when they're not physically co-located. And the third point there is a whole student experience that fosters belonging and becoming. And we'll be looking at that in just a second, why that's an important dimension of our approach. And we want whatever we do when we engage our students to be inclusive, diverse, and socially balanced. So quite a simple menu, actually, that allows us to think creatively. Certainly in response to the pandemic, but as with you, I'm sure you're now starting to look at practices that you've introduced and thinking, my goodness, we've actually put ourselves in an interesting situation with regard to the future. So let's look at that point 3, really, because last February, it was time to get together as an academic community. And I led a university-wide event, and it was a really nice event, but right at the heart of it was essentially this diagram. We, of course, were concerned about our students who may be feeling alienated. You know, all the good words can only go so far. For our academics, yes, we've done all the development work around the active curriculum and the active curriculum framework, and all of the wonderful pedagogies that can be derived from such a framework. But the reality is our staff were having to engage with technology in ways that they'd never used it before. And so our challenge set out by those 4 principles was exactly right. So by February, it was time to take a bit of a breath. And I introduced the Unified Active Learning adoption framework. In fact, I really called it adoption and evaluation framework. And the reason I put it together around those 4 principles was to ask people to spend some time really asking questions about the student experience. Yes, we had done what we needed to do, for sure. We'd really got our act together. But the question was, were we looking after the interests of all of our students, however they were able to access their learning? So, turning to, quite a lot of work on alienation and so forth, including Sarah Mann in particular, we can look at some of our students absolutely feeling alienated, and our academics feeling alienated and frustrated, feeling left out, not feeling any sense of belonging, a sense of displacement. That idea that for some students who could go onto campus, it was okay, but for those others, well, hard luck. Excuse me. Disorientation as well. So normally, disorientation isn't a major factor in the normal situation, if there is a normal situation. Disorientation, feeling lost and being lost is there as well. Feeling isolated, feeling disconnected. So, going back to social media, one of the key words when we think about the benefits of social media for learning is connection, connectivity, and so forth. And I won't go through George Siemens' principles there, but the whole idea of connectivity is really multi-dimensional, and it really does, if we think about such ideas, it does take us to the left-hand side of this screen where I use the word shine, but I want to use the word affinity. Out of my work on learning spaces, the word affinity came through loud and clear. And it's about agency, it's about enactment and having a sense of being, belonging, emplacement, rapport. You can read those words for yourself, but presence, how we create, have agency and create presence, whatever our role is in the learning environment. And there's that connected word. And the idea that if we're there, we're contributing. So these are the sort of positive ideas. And the challenge really back in February was to have a discussion with students, with staff, with managers, and asking, how are we measuring up at this point? How are we doing? And so what I'd just like to do, if we can for a second, is just set you a little challenge. I'm just looking at my notes here, but in the chat, can I just ask you, what word would you have added to this slide? It could be on the positive side, it could be on the shadow of participation side. Maybe thinking about your own experience, some of the challenges you've faced or some of the successes you've had. You might want to add a word beginning with E to the middle of the screen. I'm so glad James and Peter are here because I know you will relish the opportunity to add one or more words and rise to my challenge. So in the chat, empathy's there already, Sue, but it's a really good word. This is absolutely the challenge, isn't it? How to create an empathetic learning environment. Confused. Right, thank you. Excellent. Anyway, you can see care, brilliant. Oh goodness, you know what? We may be in danger of creating a new taxonomy of C's here. Do focus on the C's. I think we know C's work for most situations. So confused, care, contribution, connection, some great words. Ownership, absolutely. Shine, experimental, yes. Well, experimental, yeah, that's really nice, and it points to that idea of agency, that we're there to do something and discover things and follow our curiosity. Communication, excellent. Okay, I'll move us on from here for the moment. Upskilling. Competence, yeah, that again points us towards agency and feeling as though that I'm in a space where I feel good and able to engage in whatever way and respond very positively. A lot of the work that I've been doing over the last year or so has been around employability in the curriculum, and this idea of feeling empowered. Have we got that one? Empowered? No, we can add that one to the E list. Okay, I'm going to move us on though, but you get a sense, when we're thinking about a learning environment, these are the sort of conversations that we're having. Experience and empathy and all of these things is what we're interested in, whatever learning environment, whatever space we're creating. I'll spend a wee bit more time just because I want to share this diagram, which I use at any opportunity I possibly can, but it encapsulates some of the same things. I think this works quite well. Certainly for me, it builds upon work done in occupational therapy originally. Goodness, I've forgotten the original author's name, but Hitch et al. Picked up on initial work around doing, being, and becoming, I think. And so we can see that we've got these ideas of doing. So if you've got an active curriculum, quite an important word. We are essentially involved in productive activities, what we do to construct our knowledge and skills. So this doing word's important. Being sounds similar, but this is about identity. This is about enactment, the embodiment of active engagement. And it's about the way we act and how it reflects who we are, our discipline or cultural context, and who we want to be. It focuses on our attitudes and dispositions and reinforces our sense of self in what we do. So again, these are the sort of things we should be thinking about as we think about a media system and what we're trying to design. Becoming, we have a sense of purpose and direction. We're motivated. What we do feels right and relevant. So that authentic learning thing. And it answers the so what of just being. Belonging is almost overused, but it's about feeling valued or part of something. Connecting, well, I've mentioned that a little already, but the addition of connecting draws in ideas of connectivism. Our right to be is validated. We see ourselves as participant and contributor. We have a right and responsibility to be here. This is about authentic and connected knowledge, learning networks, agency in making connections and so forth. Simply, things feel joined up. So this framework is really quite useful for talking to colleagues about what we're trying to do in our learning environment. And I'm so glad Sue's here because you can see how I've used the 5 C's. But this is the Anglia Ruskin University LMS ecosystem. So of course, we have tools, and the interesting thing is we now look at media within this workshop and how it relates to other parts of our learning environment. So at Anglia Ruskin, we use Canvas, and that's a fairly recent addition. More recent, though, is Microsoft 365, which for us was unheard of until about mid-February 2020. We've just been setting out on a project to introduce aspects of Microsoft 365, and of course Teams is part of that. So we almost got in there at the last minute, and we've been doing a lot of catching up around that. But actually it's become incredibly important to us in terms of providing a social learning environment. In terms of media, it's been incredible. And one of the things that you have to note about the pandemic is all of a sudden, talking into microphones and webcams and so forth is fairly commonplace, to say the least. Now, that wasn't the case pre-pandemic. We've had to get to this position where we're all relatively confident with recording videos and speaking into microphones and so forth. That has been a significant change in terms of media enhanced teaching and learning. Okay, let me move on through, but you can see that in this diagram, we have the media system there, and we are in the process of trying to procure the right media system for us. And that's essentially at the heart of the conversation that we will have shortly in this workshop. So 2 years and the METaL review. So pre-pandemic, we set out to do this. And what we're looking at doing was defining the pedagogy of media enhanced teaching and learning, establishing prototype pedagogies, establishing a detailed requirements specification. So we've ticked off all of those things, reviewed and updated management systems, institutional policy and guidance for capturing active learning. So I am absolutely trying to rewrite the lecture recording policy at the moment. It is so out of date and inappropriate. It's incredible. If anyone has managed to come up with a similar active capture policy, I would love to hear from you. You could save me a lot of time. I'm finding it quite complex to design the right policy for active learning and media enhanced learning as well. So media intervention, let me just give you some of the key ideas, because in a minute we're going to use these ideas. So the concept of media intervention is something that I've been sharing for a good while now. And it is absolutely about the active learning environment. And so orientation, then, it's about creating a welcoming situation, setting the scene, outlining the scope and the context for students. And then we move on to inform. Yes, we do need to inform our students and explain ideas. And, you know, of course, we have things like flipped learning, which show how informing and explaining things can be so important within the active learning space. It's about challenging. And of course, in an active learning context, the notion of challenge is really well understood. You know, if we think about problem-based learning, scenario-based learning, events and missions and challenges and all sorts of wonderful things that we can do with that word. And then we move on to motivation. So if all we're doing is talking about engagement, then motivation is clear and understood. And of course, there's a lot of overlap between some of these ideas, like challenges are hopefully very motivating, et cetera, et cetera. So these aren't exclusive aspects of the media intervention framework. And feedback, and because my circle is only so big, really I think feedback's the key word for me there, but of course everything to do with formative and indeed summative assessment would fit into that category. So now, who are our academics? Who are our students? So our academics are users, our students are users. Our students are producers, and so are our academics. And by understanding that, that helps us to think about the diverse ways in which media can be used to enhance teaching and learning. And we may be talking about on-demand media, live media, interactive media, and I've put multi-chronous there. One of the things, and I won't go into it here and now too much, but one of the things I've noticed during the pandemic is there's been a lot of talk about synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. And, you know, just to give you an example, anyone that has had anything to do with tweet chats, you are involved in a multi-chronous situation where you are going backwards and forwards between messages and content and revisiting them later and actively engaging with them. You know, one of the things about the hybrid learning environment is that asynchronous and synchronicity, they don't capture the real essence of what active learning is. It's a to and fro between the the synchronous and the asynchronous. And in fact, it's that intersection where, for me, you often see the most interesting pedagogies. So I won't go any further into that, but because we've got limited time, what I would like us to do, now you've got a sense, hopefully, of that framework, is I would like us to spend some time together sharing and generating examples of media-enhanced teaching and learning before reflecting on what tools, systems, and policies we might need in the last part of the workshop. So at this point, Peter, I would like people to start to share some ideas of how media is used in your own practice, in your own institution. And indeed, of course, I will share with you some ideas, but I would like to hear from you first. So let me just say, thinking about belonging and alienation, and that slide, if you remember the positives and the negative experiences that we understand, you know, thinking about that and the role that media can play in an effective active learning experience, thinking about voice and agency, that idea that our learner is active and important contributor and participant. So with those sort of ideas in mind that I provided earlier on in this presentation, what I'd ask you to do is have a quiet minute or two now, and on a piece of paper or somewhere convenient, spend a minute writing down examples you have used, heard about, or can imagine for the use of media. So by media, we could be talking about video, audio, images, or dare I say it, I'm almost not going to say social media, but go on, Sue, I will say that. But I encourage you, Sue, to accept the challenge of thinking about video and audio. And I know you've been there as well before. And of course, with Peter in the room, it does remind me that we've got someone that really understands feedback well. And I'm sure every one of us turns to our own interests in terms of teaching and learning. So a quiet minute now, just what methods spring to mind, and then I'll see how we get on and ask you to share some of those. I'm going to be quiet now for at least a minute. Other than to say, try to capture your idea in 2 words. So I'll give you an example. Audio feedback, right? You can't have that one. I've said it now.
I've written that one down, mate.
No, you can't have it, Peter.
I need that one. That's important, that one.
Okay, my challenge to you then, Peter, because I know of at least 10 different models of audio feedback.
All right.
Is to define your version of it. Okay, so what I'd like you to do first, you'll see I've given these numbers out. If you would share your idea in the chat first and give it 1 or possibly 2 numbers, just to entice us with your 1 or 2 or possibly 3-word title. Let's just share those, and then we can go around and ask you a wee bit more about the ideas you're sharing. And once we've done this, we'll spend the last minutes in the workshop saying, well, what technology and what environment do we need to have in place in order to do these sort of things? So just using the chat, I would expect to see some very interesting take on the idea of audio feedback from Peter. So I'm not seeing anything coming through on my chat at the moment. So
too busy thinking. We're too busy thinking, sir.
Okay, well, go back to your own areas of interest. You know, if I was thinking about social media, there are some wonderful tools there, like Flipgrid. I'm just saying, Padlet, indeed. Padlet Forum. I need to know about that.
I mean, there's a really good workshop earlier today about Ketso, which was a face-to-face method, which is now integrated with Padlet in a really neat and interesting way. So people are, you just reminded me, there's a very interesting book about AI on my shelves back there, talking about how robots aren't going to replace people. The most progressive organizations are using robots to enhance human capacity. So it's a collaboration. And it seems to me that that's the way, in many ways, that's the way technology is going. That it's piling stuff, putting stuff together that hitherto has not been used in conjunction, like the face-to-face fuzzy felt of Ketso with the technology of Padlet. And it seems to me that's the way to go.
I used the word connection earlier, and this idea of creating a new situation, a post-digital situation, and the idea of putting things together. So, yeah, your ideas might involve video or whatever, but maybe as part of a broader or more connected pedagogy. So part of it, it's not the be-all and end-all of it. I mean, for me, lecture capture, it is really frustrating because it absolutely doesn't give us anywhere to go. It doesn't really offer too much new when we've got a really powerful media. So let me just
say, have you come across VoiceThread?
Oh goodness, yes, VoiceThread. Go on, Peter, you go for it. It's been around for a long time. Really, in terms of connection.
If you have, as I understand it, I've seen it a little bit. but it allows students to put comments onto lecturers' PowerPoints, which can then instigate dialogue. So if lecture capture in itself, I think, is a bit of a dead duck. But if you had some capacity for interaction and feedback around whatever that recording might be, doesn't that open a new opportunity?